The following is a local resident producer's program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of Oshkosh Media, the City of Oshkosh, or Time Warner Cable.
Welcome to another edition of On Oshkosh. I'm your host, Cheryl Hentz, and our guests tonight are here from Damascus Road. If you are not familiar with what that organization is or does, we will be talking about human and sex trafficking tonight. So just a couple of statistics here. Between June 1st, 2017 and August 31st of 2018, child welfare workers in Wisconsin said that almost 100, it was 99 incidents of children and youth sex trafficking statewide occurred. It's probably, and I couldn't find any more recent numbers than that. You guys might have some, but the officials believe that the number of sex trafficking cases, especially those involving children, is probably significantly higher because not everyone reports. Some people may not even know that they're being trafficked. So it's definitely a serious problem. It's one that we all need to be concerned about. And so they're going to help us sort through all this tonight and tell us how we can get involved and make a difference with this problem. So to my left is Lisa Sennholz. She is the founder and executive director of Damascus Road. And to my right is Kelly Olson. She is the support services director with Damascus Road. And Deb Allison Osby, who is not here, is their director of risk assessment. She's out of town today. So, Lisa, you've been on before, once or twice, but, you know, our audiences change over the years. Give us a little bit of a history about Damascus Road, how it got started, why it started, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll try and give you the Reader's Digest version,
yes,
which I'm not very good at, but I will try. So in 2001, we had traveled to the Philippines to adopt our youngest child. And at the time, she was 15 months old. And we were killing some time, and I struck up a conversation with her orphanage director. And I had no idea that just asking a question was going to change the course of my life. I had asked her about all of the homeless children that we had witnessed. This was my second trip to the Philippines. And there were children, toddlers, early elementary age, young adults who were sleeping on the streets, and they were sleeping on pieces of cardboard. They were in the alleyways, and so I was asking her about these kids, and I said, what is to become of them? What is their fate? And she said, well, we don't have enough orphanages to take in all these children, and most of them, if they haven't already, they will either be sold, coerced, tricked, bartered to the child sex brothels. And she had even mentioned that we had passed some on our way to the orphanage. We just didn't know what they were. So finding that information out just really opened and expanded my eyes, because this was 2001. I had never heard of something like this happening. And we traveled back home, and I was sitting on the airplane, and it was my husband, our new daughter in the middle, and myself. And I had looked at my husband and said, I'm a stay-at-home mom, and I live in northern Wisconsin. What in the world am I going to do about what we just learned in the Philippines? Because I can't just go home now and say, that's really too bad. Someone needs to do something about that, because someone needs to be the someone. And so my husband and I we chatted about it, and I didn't know what to do. And so I was bringing home a brand new 15-month-old to a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. And I just knew I was a stay-at-home mom, so I knew that the timing wasn't right. There wasn't anything I could really personally do. So I waited until my kids were older, and I started to investigate what can I do to help. And I found an organization on the East Coast that was willing to train me because I had absolutely zero knowledge. I didn't know anything about trafficking. And so they trained me via the internet, snail mail. We talked on the phone. And once I received that training, I went to Cambodia with them. And while we were in Cambodia, we went into rescue homes with those same children that we had learned about in the Philippines. And so we were working with these kids who were being rescued out of brothels by hours, days, weeks. And when I got back, I was forever changed. I couldn't not do something beyond that point.
Yeah. And that was
2009 is when I went to Cambodia.
Okay. The first time.
Yes, 2009.
Okay. All right. And so Damascus Road, I've seen it written different ways, Damascus Road Project and Damascus Road.
Yeah. Well, our legal name is Damascus Road Project because there are many Damascus roads, but we actually just go by Damascus. It's easier for us.
All right. So I'm not going to get my hand smacked if I
No. You're fine.
I always like to make sure of that.
Yeah.
So without getting into real big involved descriptions of what you guys do with your specific jobs, why don't you, Kelly, tell us what you do in your role as Support Services Director?
Okay, well, it started with Lisa having some behind-the-scenes work that she wanted to have some support with. In the beginning, it was Excel spreadsheets and some other computer-related things that just aren't real fun to do, and when you want to focus on what she was doing, that just came into my lap that way.
Yeah.
And over time, it's just morphed into basically what's ever needed.
Okay.
So I work one-on-one directly with survivors. I coordinate whatever they need the best way I can, point them in the direction of services, connect them with what they need so that they can kind of hit the ground running. There as an advocate if they need somebody with them, perhaps if they're appearing in court or dealing with a situation in the legal area. I can be there as their cheerleader. I don't bring any legal background but I can actually be of support to them. And we just kind of walk alongside them with whatever they're dealing with.
Sure.
And as long as they'll have us.
Okay. And you were the founder, Lisa, we know that, and you serve as executive director, as I mentioned in the open. Your job probably entails a lot of everything too, right?
Yeah, the things I don't like, I pass off to Kelly. I do my best.
See, now the truth comes out, right?
Oh, I've known that all along. I knew what the buy-in was.
Yeah, so primarily, I guess we do everything, but primarily what I do is I travel throughout the state and do trainings and presentations. And that consists of churches, youth groups, schools, civics organizations. We've trained TSA agents. We actually had the Director of Homeland Security for Wisconsin come to us and ask if we would train all of their TSA supervisors in the state of Wisconsin. And so we did that. We train social workers and foster parents, and so I'm always somewhere different in the state. So that's a big part of what I do, and then working with the girls one-on-one. I've not been able to go into jails very much lately because I've been traveling so much, but we are in the jails every week. We are in Winnebago County Jail, Outagamie County Jail. 2 days ago I was in Shawano County Jail. We've been to Wapaka County Jail.
Wow.
So my primary role is in doing QuickBooks, which I don't like. I need a QuickBooks volunteer. I don't like that.
So how, you mentioned some of these different county jails. So how wide of an area then do you guys actually cover?
Well, it depends on are you speaking about the survivors that we're working with? Because if we're statewide doing trainings and that sort of thing, We also work with the girls that are brought into our presence in some way, whether they're given by a referral, or we meet them through jail, or we meet them through other women. They can be from all over the state,
Okay.
any city. We actually have a list of all of the cities that our women have come out of that we're working with
Wow.
in the state. And when I'm giving presentations, I show those because we like to dispel the myth that they're not just coming from Madison and Milwaukee. They're coming from Omro and Winneconne and Neenah.
Yeah.
They're coming from Iola and Wapaka and Little Eland up north and White Lake and tiny little towns. We have an unincorporated town now, Briarton.
Where is that?
That is outside of Black Creek.
Okay. All right.
So yeah, we work with pretty much anyone throughout the state.
I guess that would
But-
explain why you're doing so much traveling then.
Right.
So I know I've got a lot of questions, but there are 3 different things that you guys focus on. And it's educate, locate, and advocate. And so why don't we kind of go through each of those and tell us, I think you kind of just did a little bit in a nutshell.
Right.
But we can get into a little bit more specifics if you'd like. Tell us about the educating part.
Right. So the educating is really, so Tara Kozlowski is also one of the directors, and she is our outreach director. And her focus area, she's actually a teacher, and so her focus area is students. And so she works with the youth in middle schools and high schools. She just participated in communities at Oshkosh North. They have, I think it's a 3-month program where some students follow us and learn everything they can about trafficking, and then put on presentations to train other students and do fundraisers and that sort of thing. So Tara is in the high schools and in the middle schools. I am as well. I travel to whatever high schools we're being requested at throughout the state. So that's one part of the education, and then the other part is what I was explaining before. Any groups that want more training, want to learn more about awareness, and we're also doing education really just even with the women that we're serving, because so many of them, they do not self-identify, and they don't know what it's called, what's happening to them.
Okay. Locate. That's got to be a little bit challenging, or maybe a lot challenging. Who would like to talk about that aspect of what you do?
So the locate piece is really however they're brought to us. So be that from law enforcement, through social services, through the jail, through some of the other, we have currently, I was not good prior to January 1 of 2017 keeping statistics of how many people we were helping. That wasn't a focus. That wasn't one of my strengths.
Was that part of QuickBooks?
Yeah, that's something I'd like to get rid of. Actually, when Deb came on board with us, Deb being the risk assessment director that she is, we like to refer to her as the buzzkill, because she, and I say that lovingly, and she just really suggested, we need to keep statistics and we need to keep track of these things. And so prior to January 1, 2017, I wouldn't be able to tell you how many people that we helped. But now, because of Deb, I can tell you, we are at about 207, I'm going to say. 2017, we had 73 women. 2018, we had 101. And then this year so far, we're at 33.
Correct.
Wow. Well, you guys are definitely keeping busy and doing a good service. Now, advocate. Let's talk about what that. It's interesting that there are 3 things, because it's kind of like a 3-legged stool, right? And the stool doesn't work unless all 3 are strong, right? And so there's this advocate part that wouldn't work without the other 2, and vice versa with the others. So tell us about the advocate part.
Well, that, like you said, it's kind of intertwined with the other 2. So often when we're meeting with someone for the first time and they're struggling with what they're dealing with and haven't self-identified, we start with educating them and helping them to understand what they're going through. And then from there, we're walking with them to try and figure out what they need. We see a lot of overlap with the women that we serve, also with the AODA community. Addiction is a component often, but not always.
Sure.
And so for me, when I'm working with a woman, we start out with meeting their basic needs when they don't have to worry about even being able to shampoo their hair or have a pair of pants and a shirt to wear that fits them, or where their next meal is going to come from. Then we can sit down and address some of the deeper needs, and that would definitely be where the advocacy piece fits in. So the women that we serve, we have women that are incarcerated in county jails, but we also have women that we serve that are in state prisons and even a federal prison. And we serve women that are in residential AODA treatment programs, women that are doing outpatient treatment, women that are living in the community that are homeless, and women that are on the road to recovery in various different places. And so each one of them has a unique set of needs, and we just try and help them with those needs the best we can.
So I kind of want to start at the beginning of this trafficking thing, because I think that far too many people don't really understand what it is. We hear about it, but I don't know that people really completely understand what it is. And there's, two different sets of terminology that are being used, and I'm not sure that I even understand the difference between them. We hear sex trafficking a lot, and we hear human trafficking, not as much. You can't have, let me see if I have this part right. You can't have sex trafficking without human trafficking, but you can have human trafficking without the sex trafficking part.
Correct. So
Okay.
the breakdown, really, to make it simple, so human trafficking encompasses 3 areas. The first would be sex trafficking. The second would be CSEC, which is a commercial sexual exploitation of children. And then the third would be labor trafficking.
Okay.
They all fall under the umbrella of human trafficking.
Okay.
And then
sex trafficking
sex
is
trafficking is a part of
Okay.
human trafficking.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. So how does this work for what you guys at Damascus Road do? Let's take the jails, for example, or a prison, or these centers, the homeless shelters, what have you. Do you get a call from that agency saying, we have a woman or a girl here who needs help, she's a victim of sex trafficking? How explain for us how it works.
Sometimes that's the way that we're notified. Sometimes it's somebody that we're already working with that says, hey, my friend, I'd love for her to talk to you too.
Okay.
So we actually get referrals from other women that we're working with, but we can get a referral from law enforcement. We get girls that will kind of learn about what we do and self-identify once they've learned what human trafficking or sex trafficking is through education in the jail, and then they will reach out to us and ask for help. So they could self-refer too.
Okay.
And the interesting part about the jail is we were never in the jails. I had worked, prior to 2016, I had worked with women who had jail as a piece of their life's puzzle, but I had never worked with someone who was actively incarcerated, was an inmate. So in 2016, we actually got a phone call from a detective here in Oshkosh, actually, and they had done a drug operation. And during that, there was a young girl, she was around 18 at the time, that they recovered. And the officer said, I'm pretty sure she's being trafficked, but she's not really talking to us about that. So we have her down at the jail, and will you come and speak with her? And so when I went and had a conversation with her, a lot of times the girls don't immediately share their life story. they have to grow to trust us, or they don't really understand what's happening to them, so they don't know how to put it into words.
Right.
But this particular gal just kind of spilled everything and said, yeah, the guy they arrested, he was my pimp, and he was making me do this. And so as we were chatting, she said, what are you doing to help all of the other women that are here? And I said, I don't know. I guess I'm not. And so we started working with her on a weekly basis. One of the things that we do is we take women to long-term human trafficking specific restoration programs. There is one in Wisconsin that we refer to in Green Bay, and they actually are housing 2 of our women. But there are others out of state that we use. And so I was working to get this young woman into one of the out-of-state programs. And so I was working with her probation officer, and I would go see her on a weekly basis. And every week I would show up, she would say to me, what are you doing about the other women that are in here that need your help? The other women who have pimps and who are in really bad situations.
So she was staying on you.
She really was. And so I left and went home, and what am I going to do about this? Because I only have clearance to work with her, and I only know her. I don't know any of the other women in the jail. And so she had already referred a number of girls in the jail, had already told them we would talk to her or talk to them. And long story short, we connected with the jail administration at Winnebago County Jail and basically said, you have a lot of women here who are being sexually exploited. You don't know that because they haven't been brought in on prostitution-related charges. They're here on drug trafficking. They're here on shoplifting. They're here on probation violation. So you would have no way to know that, but this is what's happening. And so we created a poster, and they allowed us to put a dozen posters throughout the jail. And when we did that, we were inundated with women. And then, of course, word got to Outagamie County, and women started contacting us there. And so that's kind of how the ball started rolling with the jail.
Sure. I know when, Kelly, this is your first time here, but Lisa, when you were on last time, it was about 2 years ago, I believe, and you were just then either starting to do or you had already been at this for a little bit, but you were involved in a pilot program at the Winnebago County Jail. Was that?
That is the pilot.
Okay.
They were so great and gracious to us, and they basically said, you know, have you ever done this sort of thing before? And I said, worked with trafficking victims? Absolutely. Worked with them inside of a jail? No. And they said, so we're basically your guinea pig. And I said, yeah,
absolutely.
Guinea pig away, because that's the situation.
Yeah.
And they said, okay, well, we'll give it a try and see what happens.
Yeah. How does working with women in an institutional setting, like a jail or a treatment center or what have you, differ from working with them just in everyday walk of life kind of situations?
In some ways, it's a little bit more complicated because there are some restrictions with what we are able to do with them if they're in a restricted setting. But in the ways that really matter, I would say there's no difference for me than sitting here and having a conversation with you.
Yeah.
It's just another human being who is struggling and needs love and encouragement and somebody to just see where they're coming from and to be able to encourage, you know.
I would say a challenge for us, though, is with the women who are incarcerated, so many times we just want to give them a hug. They need to have that encouragement and reassurance, and we can't do that. And that's something that's different with our girls who are on the out. We can hug them and, you know, cry with them and have more of that close relationship.
Yeah.
But when we're in the jails, it's very difficult, and the girls will say so many times, I just wish I could give you a hug. And, you know, we'll wait when you get out.
Yeah.
Then we'll hug. Yeah.
So tell us what trafficking looks like. Because I'm not sure. I mean, I watch a lot of television late at night, and I keep seeing the same kind of commercial from the Brown County Sheriff's Department, I think, or the police department up there or something, you know, talking about trafficking. But tell us what trafficking really looks like. You know, I guess sex trafficking, because that's probably the biggest part of what you ladies see, I'm assuming.
Yeah. I guess to kind of start that off would be traffickers. There are different models of the way pimps operate, recruit, groom. And when we say trafficker or pimp, it's the same thing. It's an interchangeable word, really. One of the areas that we see the strongest is the boyfriend pimp. And so that person really, their whole focus is to groom this young woman, and women of any age, groom them into believing that this person cares about them, and they are their boyfriend. And so there's an entire psychological process that happens. Almost all of our girls have complex trauma. Many of them have PTSD. They have night terrors. They have so many ramifications of the psychological manipulation that happens. Most of them have Stockholm Syndrome. So the grooming process is a huge piece of that puzzle. What ends up happening is they end up with trauma bonds. And so even when they don't want to leave this particular person, they feel loyal to them. They feel that they have to stay with them. And so it's difficult until they're ready, until they're incredibly, set at the point where either someone has intervened and explained to them that this isn't okay to be treated like this, or until they come to that knowledge on their own, we don't see a whole lot of change.
Yeah.
So for trafficking to really flourish, there has to be manipulation. There has to be force, fraud, or coercion, because this person has to feel maybe they can't leave a situation, even a perceived feeling of they can't escape.
Okay. So they're not necessarily being held captive in a place, but they feel that they're being held captive.
Right.
And they fear what may happen if they leave.
Right.
Or try to leave.
Exactly. And a lot of our girls will say, the situation I'm in right now, I don't like it and I don't want to be in it, but I'm more scared of not knowing when I leave what happens to me. So their known is in some way a comfort because they know what to expect, even though they don't want to be there. But not knowing what to expect scares them.
Sure. So how do you help a woman like that? Because you don't work that much with underage.
Correct.
Do you?
We do. When we get an underage referral, we try and work with them just for a short period of time and refer them on, because we are 18 and over.
Okay. So how do you help those women then that are coming to you in cases like that, where they feel trapped and they feel like they can't get out and they fear what may happen to them if they do try to get out? Obviously we can't put everybody in a witness protection program, so how do you help them break free from that hold, whether it's real or imagined?
And that's the challenge. And it takes a lot of hit and miss, try and fail. Typically, it can be up to 7 times trying to leave before you have a successful exit from that type of a situation. And a lot of times there's a lot of manipulation happening. We see in our area in particular where drugs are used either to control somebody or to blackmail them.
Okay.
And so maybe somebody becomes addicted because that's how they were controlled, or they also become addicted because that's a way to escape mentally what they're enduring. And so it's very hard for someone to leave when they now are afraid to have to detox.
Sure.
And go through that whole experience. It's a challenge. And so what we see with a lot of people is you just have to, again, start with the most basic of needs, create a bond, earn their trust, under-promise and over-deliver. It's something we always focus on. And to be reliable. You have to be the stable place in their life when nothing else is.
Okay. And in those situations where you've tried and it has failed. Has it failed because their intention or their plan backfired? Or what has caused it to fail? They're just not ready?
Correct.
Sometimes.
Okay.
They have to be ready. We don't force anyone to do anything. They have to be at the place in their life where they are ready to take that scary step. We've had a few girls recently who we've worked with now for 2-3 years, and we've just walked alongside of them, and we were there for them, and they had some good times, and then they fell back, and then they moved forward, and then they fell back. And just in this past couple weeks, all of a sudden, all of these women are ready. And
Wow.
so we're now inundated. Okay. So now it's the next step. And, when we talk to them and say, what was it? What was it for you? And they all have different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them wouldn't seem important to anyone, but it's important to them.
Sure.
Others are big. Some of our girls, one of our girls that finally, decided she was ready, her trafficker beat her, and she needed stitches in her face, and he unfortunately sexually assaulted her, and she was in a very low point of her life, and she just said, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
Some of our girls just end up at a spot where they have nothing left. They are depleted and hopeless.
Yeah.
Absolutely hopeless. And they come to us and they say, I'm willing to try what you can offer me because I've got nothing left. I've tried things and nothing
Yeah.
else.
We see so many women who have burned every bridge.
With family, with friends.
Exactly, within the community resources that are available. And when they've depleted everything else, we're still there
Yeah.
and we're consistent and we say, it's okay, we still love you, we'll figure this out, and then you just become part sister, part mom, part friend, part whatever it takes to meet the needs of
Sure.
that person. And
When I think about jail or prison, it's a dark kind of image for me. It's a place I would never want to go to, figuratively or literally. But I would think, in some ways, when a woman gets arrested, being in jail is a safe place because their pimp can't get to them,
Correct.
right?
most
Well,
often.
Yes and no.
Okay.
One of the girls I was just with the other day was explaining to me at one of the jails she was at, the way the jail is set up is the men and women had to go down the same hall even though they were split, and she could see her trafficker.
He'd been arrested also.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
And he was trying to pass messages to her, and he was trying to recruit other girls that were in jail. And so that gives these women a sense of there's no safe place. He
Yeah.
can get to me here.
Yeah.
And so those situations are unique, but we also have other women who, when they're in jail, they say, this is the safest place that I feel to be. I know he can't get to me here. Maybe their trafficker's not even been arrested, or he's in another state or something, and they'll feel safe. And it's difficult for them to think about leaving because they don't have any options when they get out.
Sure.
We actually had a woman recently that we were working with who's incarcerated and was coming close to her release date. And her statement was she was so panicked at the thought of not knowing how she was going to land on her feet that she was actually considering sabotaging the rest of her stay so she could stay longer.
Sure. Or committing a crime as soon as she gets out.
So she can go back in.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and we hear that about homeless people sometimes too, that, that is a place where they have a roof over their head, especially in inclement weather, and they can get 3 meals a day,
Right.
and food and shelter, basic necessities of life. And so we hear frequently about homeless people purposely committing some kind of a crime so that they can have those basic things.
And there are a number of sexually exploited people within the homeless population here in our area too. So when you have a choice between standing in line every day hoping for a bed and a shelter, or finding some corner to curl up in, or somebody who will leverage a warm bed and a meal in exchange for sex. Sometimes you make a choice that you wouldn't normally make.
Right.
And so we see that. We have women that we work with that have reached out to us because they say, I can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
And what's sad is there are so few resources available to get your feet on the ground. And when we meet with somebody and they need a place to stay, a way to get to and from, medical attention, employment, and they're dealing with legal ramifications of a crime they may have been dealing with, and the financial obligations that come with that, and they have to manage all of that at once, in addition to AODA, required to go to meetings, required to check in with an agent. It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot all at once. It's a lot to manage, and when you don't have anything, just picking one thing at a time and trying to help them meet that need so that they can rebuild a life.
Sure. Do you have employers that you work with to help them find gainful employment that's legitimate? I know that the drug court, has employers that they work with. Is it a similar kind of situation here, that you have employers that you can go to and say, hey, I've got this woman and here's the deal? And
We have a list of resources for
Okay.
the women, and they know many of our women are felons, and so we have felon-friendly employment
Okay.
on the resource list that they can reach out and connect with. The challenge becomes you don't ever want to do everything for them. They need to
Yeah.
take responsibility
Sure.
and do things for themselves as well. So we provide the information and the way to get to that resource, however that looks, but they need to take that next step.
Okay. All right. When I first opened the show, we talked about this 99 cases between June 1st of 2017 and August 31st of 2018 that involved children or youth in sex trafficking. Almost 100 cases, and that's what we know of. Do you have any more recent statistics than that?
I don't have any pertaining to that, but what I
Okay.
can speak to, what we both know, is so many of our women, they're not included in any statistic anywhere, and they started out being trafficked as a minor, and they're not on anyone's radar with statistics. If you sat down and have a conversation with our 200 plus girls, the majority of them are going to share with you that they were sexually abused when they were a child or an early adolescent, and that abuse continued and morphed into different areas. And they may have been system involved. They could have been, came in contact with foster care or not, but they're not a statistic.
Okay. It is often a hard crime to spot, as we've kind of talked about a little bit here, because people don't self-identify. They may not even know that they're a victim of trafficking. Maybe 6 or 7 months ago, I'm not sure, time flies. And the older you get, it seems to be flying faster.
It accelerates.
But
for
it
sure.
was last year, anyway, toward the fall, I believe, that I did an article on trafficking. And as part of that, when I spoke with the Oshkosh Police Department, he was telling me about these Asian massage parlors. And we certainly have them here. They're all over. This is a huge business in the United States, and they're not doing massages to make their majority of their money. They are fronts for prostitution, is what I've been told, and other states, like I said, have similar problems. It's a billion-dollar industry annually. Do women who are working in these parlors, these massage parlors, do they know that they're victims? One of the things, let me just say this, one of the things that the officer told me is sometimes they don't even know where they are.
Correct.
Geographically.
Correct.
And that to me is unfathomable. I mean, how do you not know where in the world you are?
We had a situation that comes to mind with a woman who was trafficked from China. And she was working at a massage parlor, and law enforcement did a recovery and called us in. And she only spoke Mandarin Chinese, and so we couldn't communicate. We called UWO and asked if they had anyone fluent in Mandarin Chinese, and they sent over, I want to say he was like a chemistry professor.
History professor.
Okay.
Yes.
But he was fluent in Mandarin Chinese, and this poor man, I think we traumatized him to no end, because he would look at us and say, "You want me to ask her that?" And, "Yeah, we need you to ask that." So we met with her in the jail, and when we started asking her questions, what you quickly learn if you have any education in this field is they're scripted. They know how to answer certain questions, but other questions they can't answer.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the questions that I had asked her was if she knew where she was. And she said yes, and I said, "Can you tell me where that is?" And she said, "Chicago." And I said, "No, we're not in Chicago. Do you have any idea at all?" And she had no idea. And so once we kind of started asking her questions as to how did she get here, because the story was she came from China, she flew to Canada, she snuck across the border in Canada, dropped down into New York. From New York, she flew to Chicago, and that's where she thought she was. And so when we started asking her the questions, you only speak Mandarin Chinese, you don't speak English. How did you get from Chicago to Nina, where she had been recovered? She couldn't answer that. I asked her, she admitted that she was working at the massage parlor, and so I asked her how she communicated, and she couldn't answer that. And but originally, her story, whenever you stuck to her script, then she could answer. But if you went off script, she would just freeze deer in a headlight, and she couldn't answer the questions because she hadn't been coached on those things.
Yeah. Well, and it makes you wonder how they are, since they really don't speak fluent English. I guess there aren't that many things that you need to communicate about in a massage parlor, but, you have to be able to count money and communicate in some way, because I'm sure that there are some people coming in for a legitimate massage. Probably not a lot.
Yeah, I'm going to go with probably not.
But
in those
arenas.
they're
Either way. You've got to be able to communicate in some way. So I don't
There's
know.
usually somebody overseeing that too,
Right.
that
There's
maybe
someone
speaks
else.
a little bit.
right.
Okay,
They do.
got it.
But with her situation, she wasn't just working in the massage parlors. She had ads on the sex for sale websites, and so when I was asking her, how do you communicate with the men, because you have to find out what the men are wanting, what they're, you have to agree on a price, and she couldn't answer that either, because she was trying to explain to us that she did this all on her own volition. She just brought herself and snuck into the U.S., got herself to Chicago, and there was no one helping her. There was, and so when you started asking these questions of, then how are you communicating with these men? You don't just know what they want. They have, different choices that they can ask you, and so she couldn't answer anything. And when we told her we would help her, we had an immigration attorney there that was present, who said, "We're not trying to harm you. We're trying to help you. And if you can give us this information," because we knew without a doubt she was part of a trafficking ring, an international ring, and she wouldn't give anything up. And that's not unusual, because especially women in other countries, they have a lot of fear because their families are threatened. They may be in debt bondage, which in debt bondage, it just keeps growing because the trafficker keeps adding room and board and food, and they can never get out of the debt bondage.
Right.
So she was frightened, and,
Sure.
and rightfully so.
How are you guys funded? You're a nonprofit, 501c3. So donations are tax deductible. Where does the primary source of your funding come from?
Well, because we are an all volunteer run organization, none of us draw a wage of any type, and we rely on those donations. So when Lisa or Tara are doing a presentation, sometimes where they're presenting, those folks will offer a donation of either money or help us out with donations of things that we can use to help the girls. There's occasional grants that we might apply for, different things like that too. Fundraisers, we had a fundraiser earlier this week at a local restaurant where they donated a percentage of the proceeds from the day. We have another one coming up in next month. So it's just kind of piecemealed together.
Where's the one coming up?
Pizza Ranch. In
On the
Oshkosh.
frontage road.
Yes.
Yes.
And that is the last Monday of June.
June. Yeah.
Okay, last Monday of June, all day long it'll be going on?
It's from 4 to 8.
4 to 8,
to
okay,
8.
4 to 8. So Pizza Ranch, next to Motel 6 on the frontage road, which is on the west side of Highway 41 from 4 to 8. The last Monday in June, you said?
I
Okay,
believe it's the 25th, but I'm not 100% sure.
that sounds right, but I'm not sure either. But, so from 4 to 8, they'll give a percentage of all
Correct.
their
The
receipts.
patrons.
Right.
Okay.
What's
Right.
really neat too is our volunteers will get to be there that night, and they'll be waiting tables and being able to answer questions for the general public that want to know a little bit more about who we are and what we do.
Sure, sure. Now, earlier, well, I don't know if it was earlier this year, the year is really, it's frightening how fast this year has
I
gone.
agree.
But you have recently moved into some new
Yes.
office space. Tell us where you're at now, and then we've got some pictures that we want to show
Right.
of your new office space.
Right.
Where are you located right
We
now?
are at 404 North Main Street, and we are Suite 103. We're on the first floor of the bank building. Well, it used to be the bank building. It's not now.
What's the
but-
name of the building right now?
It's
First
the First
National.
National building.
Okay, okay.
And so it's right across the street from New Moon, and then kitty corner from Exclusive Company.
Yep, and kitty corner from Peace Park or
Yes.
the public square, whatever you
Yes.
want to call it, where the
Yes,
sundial is.
correct.
So they've already got a picture up here. I hope we haven't gone, I hope this is the first one. So what are we seeing here?
So what
No, we need to go back.
what I didn't include were the before pictures. We had an army of people that came in.
Can we please go back to that first one? There we go. Okay, so what are we seeing here, Lisa?
That is our family room. And that is one half of the family room. The next picture is the other half. We came in and we painted, and we've got amazing volunteers and people that donated furniture and all of their time to make this beautiful. That is when you enter. That is our reception area. And I need to mention, because my husband will like this shout out, he did the wood wall there, the feature wall that you see.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's an old fence that we repurposed. And so what we went for is we wanted these girls, when they came in, to feel welcomed and to feel at home. Lots of them don't know what a homey feel is.
Okay.
And I think we accomplished it because that's our kitchenette.
Yeah, we're jumping a little faster here than than we're talking.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a kitchenette.
That is the kitchenette,
Okay.
correct, yes. And so that's the other
Can we
side of the
please go
kitchenette.
back?
It's really important for our girls to be able to walk in and grab a soda
we
or
go.
make a coffee and to feel home. So the cabinets are full of snacks, fridge is always full, and the coffee's always hot. And that's a really nice way to be able to walk into a space and make it yours.
Sure. Okay, now let's take a look at the next photo. Okay, so what are we seeing here then?
Yep, so that's the other side of the kitchen.
Okay.
And the beautiful ceiling tiles that you see there, they were donated to us. Almost everything that outfits this office has been donated in some way.
That's wonderful.
It has been amazing, and the transformation of it is gorgeous, and it's symbolic, because the transformation of what it was like when we stepped foot into it November 1st and what it turned into. And we see that with our girls. Their transformations are amazing.
Sure. Okay, do we have another photo? Ours. We have us. We're up.
There we are.
So there we go. November 1st is when you moved in.
Correct.
And I have to imagine that when these ladies are coming to see you, that having a space that's warm and inviting and safe and private is super, super important to them.
Absolutely. So many of them say, oh, it looks good. It smells good. It just feels good. I don't want to leave.
Yeah.
And that's what we were going for.
Yeah.
And there's
yeah.
a candy dish around every corner,
Yes.
which is a big hit with the
Yeah,
girls.
there's food everywhere. So
What are some of the challenges that these women face trying to break away from this lifestyle? We've talked about, if they're addicted in some way. We've talked about, being able to get a job because a lot of them are felons now. There are other challenges too. I mean, they're afraid of their pimp. And, what about family type relationships? If they've burned a lot of these bridges, as you had mentioned, Kelly, I would imagine that as they're trying to get out of this life, they're trying to repair some of those relationships as well,
Sure.
right?
We see a lot of relationship rebuilding when all parties are open to that. Sometimes it's too late. And so then we have to work together, under the premise that you have the family that you're born into and the family that you build around yourself. And sometimes it's the family that you build around yourself that carries you forward
Yeah,
in
your
that
extended
case.
family, yeah.
Exactly. There's the like a mom or like a sister
Yeah.
that we have. And
Yeah.
so sometimes that's what we're working with. And you're looking at women who also struggle equally with housing because of their records. Finding second chance landlords when somebody's had prior evictions or prior felonies, that's a challenge.
Do you have a list of landlords that you work with also, kind of like you have?
We have a couple, and we have some community resources that we have for that too, but we would love if there were other landlords that would be willing to entertain a second chance option, that they would reach out to us.
Sure. So felon-friendly businesses and felon-friendly landlords is
Exactly.
what you're looking for.
Right. And what we're really desperate for, though, is to have a place in the Fox Valley that is a restoration-focused program. The type of programs we're sending our women to, that most of them are 9 to 12 months in length with a second phase of maybe another 9 to 12 months. We are actually transporting. We have a kind of a general understanding within Damascus that when a girl when we're transporting her out of state, we accompany her, because that's a really scary, scary thing. And we have someone that we are taking to Kentucky on Sunday morning. And so the financing, we would love to fly, but we don't have the budget to grab tickets today because this all just happened in the last 12 hours.
Wow.
So we are going to rent a vehicle and drive her there and get her settled into this program. And so if we could have more programs like that in the state, especially here in the Fox Valley, that we could use, law enforcement could use as an emergency temporary shelter, because they don't necessarily want to arrest these women. They want to get them help, but there's nowhere to take them.
Yeah.
And then after they've gone through that first phase that she's discussing, there also needs to be a transitional phase where we're helping the girls to focus on completing any educational deficits that they have. If they wanted to get their GED or HSED, pursue maybe a trade or continuing education, and then also just getting back into the community and living among the community. And that transition is really critical. A lot of times that's a big deficit that we have to deal with women, is that there's just a lack of resources for transitioning.
Sure. What kind of legislation is there on the books, and is there anything pending right now to make this, make it so we can get tougher on this kind of crime, and yet help the women at the same time. Is there anything that's pending that you're aware of?
We see efforts all over the country to encourage demand suppression, because if there's no demand, then there wouldn't be, hopefully this wouldn't exist.
Yeah.
And to have stiffer penalties for consumers as well as traffickers.
Sure.
And there's the Safe Harbor bill that was introduced. I'm not sure where it's at right now. In
Safe
committee.
Harbor bill? Okay.
And that's, to make sure that a minor is not considered a prostitute, because that's ridiculous. No one under 18 can consent to sex for money or housing or food or drugs.
Right, exactly. So the Safe Harbor bill, is that federal legislation or is that Wisconsin?
It's in the assembly, I believe, in Wisconsin.
Okay.
Like Minnesota has it passed. There's a number of states that do.
Has it passed our Senate yet?
No, I don't know where it is in committee, but we've been to Madison a number of times to speak for a few bills. You were there for the one that would teach semi
So that
drivers.
all the trade schools and tech schools in Wisconsin would have to offer human trafficking education to anybody that's getting their CDL.
Okay. Interesting.
And I get to speak to that assembly on that regard.
Okay. We are down to about 2.5 minutes, so I guess just in closing, if people want to get in touch with you in one way or another, whether it's because they think they know someone who's being trafficked, they feel that they're being trafficked themselves, or there's kind souls out there who want to help with your organization, whether it's as a volunteer or whether it's to donate money. We've been putting the website up throughout the show, but how best should they reach out to you?
Either the website or our phone number. Our phone number is 659-0050.
Okay, so 920-659-0050 is
Correct.
the phone number. Okay, and for those who are listening to this on the radio, we have been putting up the website information. It's damascusroadproject.org.
Correct.
And there's another national one, humantraffickinghotline.org. And there's a national phone number of 888-373-7888. So again, for people listening on the radio, damascusroadproject.org, humantraffickinghotline.org, and 888-373-7888, or the local number for Damascus Road, 920-659-0050. And again, they are at 404 North Main Street, Suite 103.
Correct.
Okay, that's a lot of numbers out there.
It sure
We
is.
will also have this information on our website. So, guys, thank you so much for being here, and more importantly, for doing what you're doing. This is a tragic problem that we're experiencing, not just across the country, but worldwide. So thank you very much for the part that you're playing in this. So thanks to the crew, and most of all, thanks to you. We'll see you next time. Until then, keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.